to Today in EVE Online, September 12th. I'm here with Dirk McGurk.
Yay!
We're going to look at some of the stuff that's going on in EVE Online today, specifically between Fraternity and Army of Mango. And there apparently is a non-aggression pact. I think it's non-aggression pact, actually, technically, or a non-invasion pact for sure, that has been dissolved, or the agreement has been broken. And so MOA, is, I don't know if they're actually attacking, but they're making incursions from Omist region into Imensia and Phaethebalis, which is Fraternity's area. I know some things about this, and I'll get to that in just a second, but I'm wondering if you've even heard of Mango, Dirk?
Yeah. The Army of Mango?
Yeah, the Army of Mango. What do you know about them?
Pretty much just what I heard on talking stations, back when they were sort of around and people were calling them Mango.
Yeah, we thought it was an insult, right? Like,
they are one of the... I don't know that we thought it was an insult. I'm not sure we knew what the inside story was of, at the time. I mean, but that was around the time, all the, a lot of the stuff. Well, I mean, I guess Fraternity really sort of began it, right? But the whole, the Chinese are coming, and what will that mean for EVE Online kind of of thing. But they also come out of Serenity, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And were they the one that was the bigger kind of power over there?
The winners of Serenity? Yes.
Well, I guess you can call it that. I mean,
well, the
former PIBC leaders or whatever.
Yeah, they subjugated the map. Yeah, there was a big cataclysmic fight that happened on Serenity. This is a Chinese server. It's the I guess China has some internet rules that CCP couldn't or wouldn't adhere to, so they have their own version of EVE Online. It's called the Serenity server. So in the world, there's actually two servers for EVE Online: Tranquility, which is the Western server, and Serenity, which is China's server specifically. And that one is a smaller population. They used to get the updates about 6 months to a year after we did. I don't know if it was that far. It got closer and closer until I think recently now it's they actually have parity. So they have the same game we have. But on that server, there's clearly a lot of things that are different. One of them was that they had basically two major groups that fought each other, and one finally won in a huge battle, and that was PIBC, I believe. And that group then subjugated the rest of the map by just overwhelming and blobbing any uprising or any potential threats. And they kind of kept it that way. And I think a lot of players that were Chinese started to come over to Tranquility. They always have, apparently. But they come in, there's a language barrier, there's certainly a time zone difference, and Chinese time zone is, I believe, right before Australian. It's very close to Australian time zone, which is the dead of night for the American time zone, and it's early morning for European time zone. So what ends up happening is there's not much to do. And a lot of the Chinese players that came over would kind of kick around for a while and not find much to do and then take off. And there was a lot of people coming and going and coming and going. And then Wind Spirits, who is the founder of Fraternity, decided that he would try to, because he had very good ties with the Western Europe, that he could try to create some kind of a dam, a reservoir of Chinese players, get enough of them to hold them together, and then give them something to do. To do that, when he gets active, things happen, and when he takes off, things don't get active. But since Fraternity was formed, he's been able to find leadership to keep it going while he's away. And I believe he's still away from the game. I'm probably keeping tabs on it, but he's not around. He's handed it over to Naros. And Naros is also a very charismatic young man. They're both really engaging. It's really neat to talk to them. And they were at Vegas.
Did you meet both of them out there in Cali that time? Were they both there at that little
No,
meeting you had with
Wind Spirits? Yeah. Well, the way we got to know Wind Spirits was Grath Telkin was saying, this guy is really cool. I really like this guy. I like the way he talks. I like what he says. And so then I got in touch with him, and he said, oh, actually, I'm stopping by your area. So then he and I planned to get together. I think actually we had, I said, can you come on the program? And he did. And that was an interview that we had. And then we had lunch a few months later. And he brought an FC that with him that I met. Very nice young man as well. And then we kept in touch after that. And Naros then, along with Wind Spirits, came to Vegas. And that's where they were hanging around. And did you meet them there?
Briefly.
Yeah. Yeah, they were hanging around, seemed to spend a lot of time with Elo and Headliner, which is totally natural now that you think about it because they're all allied. But they were cool. I think there's a certain cool factor to them in real life. Headliners, he's very charismatic. He's quiet, but he's a good-looking guy. He's intense, and
guy doesn't even drink. I mean, it's just. No, I'm totally kidding.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it for you, but I think he's anyway, a charismatic guy, and then Noros is too. Very friendly. Also, these guys are like handsome and very young and engaging, right? You could see they have a lot going for them. So they were hanging out with Elo Knight, who's also young and charismatic. So I don't know.
Another non-partier.
Is he a non-partier?
No, I'm kidding. Both of them party like monsters.
Oh, do they really? I didn't know that. Yeah. What's funny? Because somebody says Elo is... Oh, it's Delana. Hi, Delana. Says Elo is the tallest CEO. I think you and I are taller than Elo. We're not CEOs, but Headliner, Elo, and those guys, yeah, they're all tall. But EVE players, this is what the side note that I got on, are really tall. There's some really tall EVE players. Brisk Rubal is like 6'2", 6'3". He's huge. Drayden, if you've never met him in real life, he's like 6'6", 6'7".
They're not CEOs.
But they're not CEOs, you're right. So Delana is correct. Elo's one of the tallest CEOs. All that to say that these guys, if you had a chance, you could have met them at EVE Vegas. I don't know if they're returning this year. I should find out.
They are. Oh,
they are. That's really cool. It'll be good to talk to them there. So going back to EVE, the Wind Spirits put together Fraternity. Naros runs it. He hired, I don't know if hired is the right word, but he brought on Elo Knight to be their commander. And they're really doing a good job of staying alive. Where they moved to was the southern part of the map, which is Imensia and Fatabalis. And next to them were the Legion of Death of the XIX guys, who are Russians, basically. And you have Legacy, who's also in that area. And the idea originally was that the Russians and Chinese would be able to fight each other because they both had similar time zones. And, that would be a big win for everybody. There would be a new time zone that would be active, and the Chinese players are actually very, very good at getting out there and fighting, and Russians are very good at getting out there and fighting. So that it was interesting how that would play out. And if either one of these groups could be brought into partnership with a Western power, that would give them time zone coverage, and that could be a real good relationship for any group that could have good ties with them. So different people were interested about, I would say, 8 months ago, were interested in this new arrival of Chinese players. A lot of them were in Goonswarm, I believe. Some of them were in Fraternity. But the PIBC guys, that had won the server in Serenity hadn't really shown up until recently, about 4 months ago, 5 months ago. And when they landed in Test's area, and Test said, "Hey, we want to help you get established." And so you had in Omist another group of Chinese players that was growing in power and growing in influence, and they were allied with Legacy. But they were quiet for the last 3 or 4 months. They've just been growing in size and growing in proficiency because they have to skill up their characters. They have to buy the ships and all that kind of stuff. And so now this is the first time. We knew this was going to happen at some point. Fraternity is composed of a lot of the players that were oppressed by the people who were in Army of Mango.
Oppressed.
I like to use those words because
I know you do.
Clear.
I know
yeah. I'm a storyteller. Yeah. So this is finally come to fruition where these two powers have decided not to ally, and they've decided to probably fight instead, although it's very early. This just happened yesterday. And I'll read you what was published here on Talking in Stations in our little sourced news. Go ahead.
Go back a little bit because one of the things that has been going on for what feels like quite some time now, in Eve time, right? Months is months plural, is kind of a long time in Eve time, and has certainly gone on beyond the drifter thing, right? That caused tribute to supposedly, stop being a word thing or whatever. Anyways, this thing between Test and Fraternity has continued on in some way for months. And now maybe it seems like there may be some more additional activity that's coming to it, right? I mean, that's really where you're getting to, right? Is the fact that this thing is sort of getting bigger, but also the fact that it's continued to go on, even through the drifter stuff, even through Blackout, even through now these Sino changes and whatnot. This has continued on, whereas in a lot of other parts of Null, it's sort of gone to a stasis mode, let's call it.
Yeah, Test and Fraternity, or Legacy Coalition and Winter Coalition, to be more correct, have been at war since their non-invasion pact ended. They had made a deal that was going to last 6 months. That date came and went. Right before that date hit, there were hostilities, so the agreement was broken. Fraternity says it was Test that did it. Test says it was Fraternity by letting somebody stage out of their territory, these sorts of things. So basically, right before the non-invasion pact was up, it was broken, and both sides went to war. And it's been a stalemate, basically, for months and months and months, and nothing has really stopped it. Now, recently, you've heard the chaos. We're in the era of chaos now for EVE Online. And what that meant was that there were drifter attacks for different parts of Null-Sec that were pretty vicious at first and then varied in severity and in breadth for a few weeks after that. Those have come and gone. I don't know if they still happen, but one of the things, and then you have, of course, Blackout, which changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And then recently, as of Tuesday, you have Sino changes, which have just happened, which limits a lot of ships from being able to use that module. Now it's restricted to only 2 classes for the regular and recon Sino, and 1 class for the industrial Sino. So it's very limited. And that's another change that affects a lot of people. But one thing you haven't heard about that's happened quite a bit is the drifter wormholes have come back in a fierce way. And so every system that has a control tower, this giant, giant structure that's foreign to EVE, it's been there now actually since the drifters appeared, which was a long time ago, 3 years, but they haven't done much. But now every one of those systems has a drifter wormhole in it, and those wormholes allow passage into tons and tons of, they have tons and tons of wormholes that allow passage from one part of Null-Sec to another, or to low-sec, I think even high-sec. And we're talking like 60 portals per hole, I believe. And what that means is that groups can travel to each other's territory without going through gates. One of the things that happened early on when Blackout hit was Horde used their Titans to secure gates. So if a fleet was coming into your territory, they would be spotted on the gate. As they were passing through, they would be bosuned from the other side and be completely destroyed before they had a chance to do anything. And that's how they were controlling the entrances to their territory originally. So these wormholes make that tactic unworkable because now foreign ships are coming through invisibly because you don't see them coming through the gates. You don't see gate fire. There's no signs of them. They come through wormholes. So you have to scan down all the wormholes in your system and watch those 24/7, which is not that easy to do. So now what's happened is the doctrines have shifted dramatically, and what's really popular right now is called the Stuka Fleet, which is essentially a torpedo and bombing stealth bomber doctrine that is used in conjunction with command destroyers that allow them to blink all over the grid so they can move out of danger's way and they get themselves into position quicker. And that is a lethal combination that allows a massive amount of bombers to show up and wipe out basically people who are harvesting Null-Sec. And that's what's made it incredibly dangerous. And it hasn't been really covered that much, but the Stuka bombers along with the wormholes is a lethal combination for Null-Sec.
There's a lot of Stuka fleets out there now. You didn't really, you didn't really. You remember back in the day when it was like Goku versus Stuka and stuff like that, and which came first or whatever. Yeah, it's
Goku
like
came
now
first,
it seems
sure.
Now it seems everybody and their mother is running a Stuka fleet.
Yes, that is the way to have fun right now. It's to be in it, and these bomber squads or whatever are huge. They're not even squads. They're fleets. 150 bombers. That's huge. During the Fountain War, at least when I was fighting in it, a bomber fleet was maybe 20 to 50 guys tops because you only needed.
That's because they were bomber fleets.
Bombers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean they were set up to be performing bombing runs as opposed to. I think the bombing part of a Stuka fleet is really sort of secondary.
Yeah, well, actually, they were Goku fleets. That's when they were invented. Pro God Legend, I think, named them, and we used Torp bombers. But we didn't have those numbers anyway. We didn't have hundreds and hundreds of bombers flying sorties. But now the evolution of Goku clearly is Stuka fleet, which is really, really oppressive right now. It's destroyable, and the guy who invented Stuka is Pando, and he'll tell you they're destroyable, and they've had to be retooled, and you have to train your timing and everything to do it right. So these things are not OP in the sense that they can't be defeated. They're just hard to defeat, and a capable FC with Stukas is very difficult to defeat, and they are just terrifying.
And they really don't cost much. I mean, that's the other thing, right? And they're highly cost effective.
Yeah. So what's happened is these Stuka fleets are all over the place, but one place they're in particularly hard is Brave territory, which is part of Legacy. So because so many people are playing with these Stuka fleets, and of course they call each other and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, they end up showing up in Legacy space quite a bit. And there's a lot of things to bomb and a lot of people to destroy in those areas. And that seems to be the playground of a lot of people, including Goonswarm, including, of course, Fraternity's fighting the war against Legacy, and you have Pandemic Legion now supporting Fraternity, so they're in the area as well. But you have Marshy, who is from Bomber's Bar, I believe, and he's, his guys are very well equipped to use wormholes. That's what they do. And so he's been able to bring Snuff into the area, I believe, and it's really become a big party zone. This is Legacy space, particularly Brave space, because it's out of the umbrella. The umbrella really extends to Test space, and then it can overlap into Brave's catch. That's the region that they're in. But what's happened is that's put a lot of pressure on Legacy, even though Legacy's having some victories and making a little progress into Fraternity space. It looks like Legacy's under a lot of pressure from all these day trippers. Well, so I think there some kind of a deal was made because you have Vili, who's in good standing with Matani and the Imperium, saying, "Hey, I know you guys are all having fun, but we're getting smacked down over here, and we're trying to fight a war, and you're exhausting us. This is not right." So what you have, I think, is you have a reconfiguring of priorities, and and the initiative. Of course, the initiative is part of the Imperium, and they're all over Legacy space, and they have been for a while. Again, because Pando is from Initiative, and he's the one that invented the doctrine for Stukas, and he's probably the guy that can utilize them the best, and etc. So I think what you've seen is Reavers who are supposed to be secret, because Asher Elias, who is their creator and FC, there's a couple reasons for that. One is Reavers are more mysterious when nobody knows what they are, but they're really skirmishing groups, a skirmishing SIG, special interest group from the Imperium, that will come into an area and really just tear the place apart as much as they can. And their whole idea is to be unnoticed and destroy and cause as much timers as possible and to have some fun. And the reason Asher doesn't like talking about it is because when you bring attention to an area that's having a lot of fighting and is really fun, too many people show up and it kind of shuts down. So he likes to say there are no Reavers. It's all a big legend. But they seem to be working through Omist, which is a border territory for Fraternity. It is also the territory that Legacy gave Army of Mango. And so with basically Goonswarm coming through the territory that belongs to Army of Mango, that was essentially a violation of the agreement that they had with Fraternity, according to Fraternity. Because the idea was that the Army of Mango would not be attacked by Fraternity, or their space would not be touched by Fraternity, as long as Army of Mango didn't raid Fraternity space with Test and with Brave. And they hadn't up until that point. They could only, but Army of Mango was free to help Legacy defend their space. So it's pretty clear. Legacy is attacking Fraternity and moving into their space. Fraternity is not attacking Legacy space. I'm pretty sure that's true. There might be skirmishes here and there, but I don't know. Sarah, if you're from Test, can you tell us what your view is on the ground?
So I'd say the official line is Legacy is helping Fire Coalition. Fire Coalition want Detroit in his mother, I think. And we're just helping them do what they need to do to succeed.
So the aggressors, I guess you could say, is Fire Coalition, and that is the XIX that I talked about, the Legion of Death, basically, or Legion of X Death.
Yeah,
that's the Fire Coalition.
Yeah, that's fire. So that's like Red Alliance, Midas, XIX, and Co. Imperius, I think, is another one as well. That's part of theirs, and Inferno. But the thing about it is Fraternity painted themselves into a very bad situation. So we had a non-aggression pact with Fraternity for the agreed 6 months, and when it was coming up to the time when that was about to end, Fraternity started pushing the terms quite frequently, quite aggressively, and it was like, okay. And then, if I remember right, they placed a fort down in 46 DP or something like that, and it was like, right, that's it, all bets are off. No aggression pact anymore, because obviously you can't keep it. And again, Fraternity seemed to have this thing of they'll make an agreement with someone, and when it comes up to near like the end of it, they'll quite happily go out and break it and try and spin it on its head.
Okay. Again, this is from Seraph Patakane, who's a part of, he's an FC for Test.
Yes.
Okay, so has Goonswarm, because I'm getting mixed messages from people. Is Goonswarm attacking through Omist? Are they going through there?
Goonswarm themselves, as far as I've seen it and I'm aware of, are not officially a part of this war. We'll let them know what's going on. I am aware of a SIG deploying for content separately. So they've gone for content in Innsmother, I think.
Innsmother.
But it's not the main Goonswarm alliance. No, they're not officially a part of this.
Well, it's a SIG, a special interest group that is a PvP component. The Reavers. I don't know where I don't know what the definition of an alliance going to war is anymore. But if you have part of your warriors, the ones that fight in your regular army, out in death squads, let's call them, that's you going to war to some degree. They're an extent. There's the same guys that fight in your fleets. They're just doing it on vacation.
But what do you call going to war nowadays? Wouldn't going to war be posturing super fleets against each other, as that's what the main components of war are nowadays? Or
Yeah. Right, the full deployment.
It's a hard thing to.
Yeah,
say.
I think it's gotten blurry over the years. It used to be everybody was smaller, so you didn't have. It would be the equivalent of a corporation.
Section.
Yeah, or it would be equivalent, like in the old days, it would be equivalent of DICE fighting somebody on the northern border of Fountain, but Bob would say, "Yeah, we're not at war." But one of your four corporations is. So it's kind of the equivalent to that. It's a gray zone. But back then it was a lot different. Things were a lot smaller.
Yeah, so some of these SIGs can pull pretty impressive numbers on their own, especially when they're PvP centric.
So there was another fight this morning, and you can probably see Fraternity, Goonswarm are banging it out in Tenerifis. That Tenerifis belongs to Fraternity, so they're defending their space there. Yeah, the Fire Coalition, thanks for reminding me. We had one of their FCs on. I want to bring him back on at some point and talk to him about what those guys are doing. But you have Fire Coalition with Legacy, and they are fighting with Winter Coalition and a portion of NCPL. Who else is supporting Fraternity?
Horde.
Well, yeah, NCPL Horde, or I guess
Iron Crown, Snuffed.
Is Snuff on either side, or are they on Fraternity?
Fraternities. No, we haven't seen them, shall we say, doing combined arms with them yet, but every one of their targets has been Fraternity aligned.
How's Initiative behaving? They're a part of the Imperium, but they seem to be.
Well, it's really interesting. Like, you see Snuffed recently, like they've been hunting Goonswarm, they've been hunting Initiative, and it's like, I thought Snuffed and Initiative were very close with each other.
Yeah, I would think so too. They call each other for help.
Yeah, so that was an interesting one when you saw an Initiative Titan dying to a Snuff Dreadbomb. That was a bit of a questions to be asked.
It'll take a few of those to put a strain on the relationship, because Snuff calls for Initiative when they need extra help. They called for him, Snuff did, when they were getting attacked, or when actually they were taking on Dead Coalition, formerly Guardians of the Galaxies up north, Sword Dragons Coalition. They actually jumped in and I think they were a little bit surprised by the resistance that Dead Coalition put up, and they got trapped and lost a ton of Force auxiliaries. But I think they also lost four Titans, I think.
Yeah, they from what I saw, that one was Snuff were attacking Dead Coalition. Dead Coalition escalated with Dreads. Snuff escalated on top of that. And when they went to drop their fax support, they dropped their fax 200 kilometers off their Titans on a separate Sino.
Out of range. Well, and they had called for Initiative to bring some support. Initially, they wanted, and Initiative did go and support. Actually, Initiative brought Stuka Fleet, the bombers, the Torp bombers, and were able to get a lot of the trapped super capitals free from the tacklers. But
if initiative didn't come at that point, I think Snuff would have been losing double figures of Titans in that fight.
Well, yeah, that's a big deal. That's a big hand. And on the other hand, they had wanted them to bring dreads. I think because they were first on the offensive and thought we could use some more dreads to try to kill some of these super caps that had been dropped. But at a certain point, but there was just not enough preparation. This is in the early days of Blackout. It's probably the first big fight since Blackout. So that fog of war created a situation that really caught Snuff off guard, which is actually a pretty interesting development. They were able to get out with the help of initiative and not lose a ton of Titans and super capitals, but it was a little bit of a stinging defeat. I don't think there was any way to spin it, and I don't think they even tried to. But to see those two groups that actually helped each other out in the north, possibly fighting in the south, it is kind of interesting. It tells you a little something.
Initiative have been very quiet about it. Like the most we've seen of Initiative, like we've had, their Stuka fleets come out. We also had one of their Naga battlecruiser fleets come out and inflict, some decent damage to us. But in terms of the actual war zone, Initiative have stayed out of it, so they're not involved at the moment. They haven't made any commitments or any discussions, I don't think, are even going on.
Oh, that's great. I need to wrap up because I started in late, so we'll only do a half hour today. But I'm wondering, Seraph, before we go, if you can kind of characterize the latest that's going on in your part of the woods there with Legacy and Winter Coalition going at it.
How to put it? We're doing all right. We can't complain. The blackout hasn't helped, obviously, with numbers because of people can't do what they want to do on the downtime. But we've got our keep style. We've secured our forward staging. We just took down one of the 46 DP forts, which Fraternity tried to stage as an aggressive jump-off point into Tenerife to harass fire. So we got another fort coming out tomorrow that we're going to have to do the same thing over again. So, yeah, for the moment, we're doing good.
Oh, excellent. Are you able to run fleets down
there? Me personally, I don't normally. I tend to be just the home save fleets guys, and I tend to just lend support with Sino's eyes and intel and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I guess I was getting at the blackout situation. How is that influenced one way or the other? What fighting is like?
From feedback I've had, like the big loss that Elo inflicted, well, it was inflicted upon him yesterday. A lot of that was down to the fact that he lost eyes on the test fleet. The test fleet saw the eyes of Fraternity on certain gates and decided to take different routes. And by doing that, Elo lost track of where we were, and when we reappeared, it was too late. We were right on top of him in a bad situation for him.
What did he lose in that fight? That was last night?
Yeah, it was a Union fleet, if I remember right.
Yeah. Where was that? Do you remember? If not, I'll look it up. I don't know if I can look.
Memory serves right. It was around the 77S area. I'd have to get the BR up again.
Yeah. YZ, maybe that was solo.
There was a big thread in it on Reddit about it because Ron, who just been promoted up to a SCOM FC, had been running that fleet, so that was his first big trial by fire. And taking down Elo Knight as your first trial by fire isn't a bad.
So Ron, USMC from Talking in Station's midweek report, was promoted to skirmish commander and took down Elo Knight.
Correct.
I got to talk to him about that. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's where a lot of the hoopla on Reddit was over that fight, was because Ron put down Elo.
That's awesome. We'll have to get him on. Have a look if he's actually on right now. That's good to know. I didn't know that.
Like, the thing about it is like Elo came in for a lot of flack on that particular thread, and it's like, yeah, okay, he made mistakes, but with the aspect of Blackout, it's not easy keeping eyes on fleets, especially if your scouts that you rely on now 100 times more than you used to aren't familiar, following everything.
Yeah. Well, I love that though. I think it certainly. I don't know about you, Dirk McGurk. We've talked about this. I felt like the last 2 years have been very dry. There's everything is almost like not worth even reporting, and that's terrible. And I thought I'm just losing interest in this game or something. I'm just a bitter vet. I don't know, but it just didn't.
I don't know how you could
Feel
say
like
that about last year. 2018, I think, was a peak as far. Well, I think it was a peak that created what 2019 obviously became after those fights. After X47, after what had happened up there, it basically set up the fact of, and we're strictly talking Null-Sec. We're strictly talking large block warfare here. It basically set up the thing that when you've basically got everybody come together, it's probably not a great outcome for what that bodes for the future. And then here we are in 2019, and then here we are with all this shit going on right now.
Yeah, I think 2018 for the scale is the pinnacle of big fights, big epic narratives. There were some neat surprises with Providence and PL and Test going after that. I think that was really interesting. Other than that, I think the struggle between the Imperium and the North early on with the 9-TAC-4 giant fight was a big deal because we were seeing the collision of two major superpowers, super coalitions going at it. And UALX was one of my favorite battles ever in EVE Online.
I mean, before that, you had, what was it, BTAC-D? Is that, trying to remember the system that it was in down there where,
9GC, I think, was the first.
Whatever. Well, remember the one down there where you had the Hell Camp and the
UALX. Yeah,
UALX.
That was my favorite battle ever in EVE Online.
And, you basically had that, but then you had what we began to call the two-front war. Remember, you had the North going on, and then and then the Southeast down there and whatnot still continuing to go on. But then you had those climactic kind of sometimes remember the $1 million battle?
Yeah, the 9-TAC-4.
Yeah. But then you did eventually have some standoffs between these two major superpowers. That happened. But look. I think that was the pinnacle for the abuses of the system that was created. That was the pinnacle for it, and it basically set up the aftermath being, well, we're just not going to have those two big giant things come together probably unless something serious happens, and something so serious as the complete and total invasion of your home region and not fighting back is the outcome of that.
Inevitable, yeah.
That was the inevitability after what we saw in 2018. But and I was just going back to 2018 because a lot did happen last year. A lot of really big stuff. But that big stuff often proves that you can't do that all the time, and you wouldn't do that all the time, and now we're left with what we are.
Well, but we've been slumping though for a long time. Those big battles were, they were apex fights, but the churning underneath, the diversity of conflict has been missing for a long time, and there weren't many surprises when somebody, even the two-front war, they telegraphed, yes, we're going to fight here, we're going to fight here. That was all very known. It was just a matter of covering it when it happened. But the battles, the only wild card in the battles were the servers. Who's going to get the worst of the server flaking out at the wrong time? It turned out North seemed to lose that fight. There was a little bit of strategic victory on the Imperium side, but essentially was a technological hurdle that they couldn't get past. It wasn't surprises. And what I'm seeing now with Blackout are a lot more surprises. Things that we wouldn't expect to see. Snuff getting trapped. Elo Knight being defeated by Ron USMC, who's great, but Elo doesn't lose track of fleets in the old situation. So there's some interest in this Blackout, not just for Small Gang, but for war in general.
It is what I would say when Blackout was announced, the biggest positive that I saw out of it, okay, in terms of, is the fog of war of real battle. Not just the, sneaking around and nobody knows your shit ass little group is there, or stuff like that, right? But like the actual fog of war of Null-Sec scale battles.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think, one of the great points of it still. Yeah. Even if I find that there are, many more detracting factors.
Yeah, sure. Even if you hate it. But yeah, it's one of those cool things. Okay. Thank you guys for showing up today. Is there any last comment from anybody that's in here that you want to get out there before we go?
Nope. All good, I think.
Thanks, Sarah, for stopping by. That was great information. Really appreciate that.
No worries. Finished work early, so I was able to jump on.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Dirk, for hanging out. Appreciate it.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me. It's morning. I'm still having my coffee.
Yeah, I'm having coffee too. Again, that's the whole dream, is me and Dirk having coffee in the morning talking about EVE Online. That's what this is hopefully about. Okay, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We are now going to move over to send you to Bjorn B. Have a good day. And that was today in EVE Online.